Hey everybody, so this is chapter 12, presenting your speech, also kind of referred to as delivery. And this is kind of what we do in public speaking. Is obviously our objective is to deliver speeches. One of the things that this book does, it doesn't actually give you a clear definition of delivery, but I've taken a definition from another textbook that I really liked. And so delivery is basically the action and manner of speaking to an audience. Now, how big does that audience have to be? Does it be 1,000 people? Can it be 12 people? Well, a lot of people, there's a lot of argument there that people say a small group is around 12 people, and anything over 12 would be considered public address. Again, I don't really think that really counts for us, but the idea is that it could mean something. But delivery basically is the action manner of speaking to an audience. In this presentation, what we're going to look at are the different types of delivery and the things that you need to think about when you're putting speeches together. So, before we get started though, remember the guy I talked about in the first lecture, which was Aristotle. Aristotle developed 3 genres of rhetoric. And these are really important, and these are actually 3 things that we can still see today. You can still do a typology of speeches, and you could put them into these categories. So the first one, of course, is being deliberative. Deliberative, I would say, is closely associated with speaking to inform if you're looking at the general purposes. It's legislative oratory is another example of looking at it. And in using that, it's basically teaching people things. So you're trying to be deliberative and teach people things. That's what that is for public address. The second one, of course, is forensic, also referred to as judicial oratory. In this case, we have like a winner and a loser. Have you ever watched Law and Order? Near the end of it, the middle to the end, they usually get into, of course, judicial oratory or forensics. When you look at things in a courtroom setting, generally there's going to be a winner and a loser. You're trying to persuade your audience. So again, general purpose, of course, is to persuade. And the third one, of course, is epidictic, and this is celebratory speech. These are speeches to entertain. As I mentioned in the first lecture, comedians, for example, they do public speaking, basically, and their job is to entertain people, and that's their objective. A good example of a speech that used to entertain people would be a eulogy, for example, which you guys will give a eulogy here. In that speech, you're not trying to inform us about the person. We already know who they are because we're at the funeral. And you're not trying to persuade us that they're a good person because we either know that or we don't know that. The idea is that you're there to celebrate their life. And that is what an epidictic speech is. And we know that this is something that Aristotle would have encountered because they gave speeches like this. There's a lot of other times where people would do that. There's speeches called after-dinner speeches that people used to give for merely entertainment. And if you've ever been in a situation where you didn't have a television or you didn't have you weren't able to get online, and maybe you just had to sit around and people were just sitting around talking, there may be times where you saw people give an epidictic style speech, and you just didn't realize you were watching one. So next we're talking about the 4 different methods of delivery. And the 4 methods kind of really stand alone. 2 of them are really close to each other, but really we can kind of break them all up. The one that we're going to focus on the most in this class that you're going to be giving is going to be the extemporaneous method. So first, let's look at manuscript speeches. The State of the Union Address is probably one of the most famous manuscript speeches that we see on a yearly basis. It is a speech that's delivered from a manuscript. It's developed sometimes months in advance. But when they create this speech, they want it to feel as if it's a conversation. They want people to feel as if they are, the person that's giving the speech is talking to them. Although they're reading the speech, they're still making eye contact. They're still focusing on that conversational pattern. And that's one thing I want you to remember. I want you to focus on being conversational with your audience. If you ever watch the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, at the beginning he has an opening monologue. That kind of rapport is what I want you to have when you're giving a speech. Now, I don't want you to be lackadaisical, and by all means, you cannot use expletives, also known as cuss words, but I want you to be very conversational. This is a very difficult style, and I know some of you are sitting there going, I want to write my speeches out word for word. I'm telling you, do not do that. It is a waste of time. This is not acting class, and I don't want you writing your speeches out word for word. I want you to create outlines, which we'll get to in a second. Now, the next one, of course, is the memorized speech. This is usually going to be a short speech that you know is going to happen. that you know you're going to receive an award, or you're going to be acknowledged for something that you've done, and you're going to have to say a few words. So maybe you develop what you're going to actually say. Now, the argument that I always have with the memorized, using the term memorized, a good memorized speech is not memorized. It's actually learned. You're able to listen to that speech and you're able to kind of play off it. You don't have to stick to an actual script. You're able to make adjustments. You know the high points that need to be hit. It's going to be short. It's not going to be really long, but again, you really want to make sure you notice. And like the first one, the manuscript, focus on the communication process. Focus on looking at that person or looking at those people and being able to play off of what they're actually doing. Now, the third one, of course, is the impromptu speech. Now, the impromptu speech is close to the memorized speech, but it's a little bit different in the sense that you don't know it's coming. You're going to follow the methods that you would for the manuscript and the memorized and the extemporaneous, but you've got to put it together kind of on the fly. So your book does a great job of kind of giving you a formula to follow, the prep formula, and I strongly encourage you to look at that. A good impromptu speech, again, is very conversational, connects with our audience, but also is brief. When people, as they say, are long in the tooth, that is a very poor impromptu speech. You don't want to see that. They knew they were going to talk and they had it prepared in advance. A good impromptu speech is very short. Now, the last one is the extemporaneous method. This is simply a speech that's given from a detailed outline, and it's very conversational, not something you have to read. It's maybe something that you really already understand a little bit, but you want to be able to pull from your external sources and be able to make sure that they're accurate and you can talk to the audience. You really kind of focus on that communication process and connecting with them and what they have to say. This is the best, most effective method that I feel that works for beginning public speaking students, because you don't have to memorize anything, because I'm sure you're having to do that in other classes. If you pick a topic that you're familiar with, you feel comfortable with that topic and you won't have any problems. But you have something there to kind of look at and to kind of follow. So the extemporaneous method is the one that we're going to focus on the most in this class. Now, one of the things, as I said in those 4 different methods, is I want you to be conversational. And in conversations we have with people, we generally are going to change our vocal delivery. We're going to make adjustments to it. We're going to be enthusiastic. We're going to be able to change how high and how low our voice is. We're going to avoid being monotoned. We don't want to talk like this the entire time. That's probably why you're taking this online speech class, because maybe the teacher you had was kind of boring, and this guy is pretty awesome. So the thing your book talks about is expanded conversational style, and that's a great thing, and you want to be able to play off that. It's going to be a little bit harder for you guys since you're online, but the idea is that you can do it. You'll find that instructors that you've really connected with are ones that you can really talk to, or maybe ones that as you're sitting there, you don't realize that as the time's gone by, it's probably because they have really good vocal delivery and they're enthusiastic about what they're talking about. They're not talking like this the entire time. Okay, so remember that. Expect to see a lot of that in these speeches as they're coming up. Now, how do you focus on that? Well, let's look at the vocal aspect just a little bit. Vocal variety comes down to 3 things, and you need to know these terms. You can actually find them in your book. Volume, rate, and pitch. Volume deals with how high your voice is, like how loud you are. Rate deals with speed. Now, I know as a fact that I talk a little fast, but adjusting that rate is what kind of keeps a little bit of flavor in there. So being able to adjust rate is really important. Pitch is how high or how low your voice is. When your voice is really low, things can get very dramatic. So that's something to kind of think about as you're giving a speech. Pauses, as we kind of go into some different types of vocal enhancements, we can look at things like pauses. There's good pauses that add dramatic effect, like when you say, "It was a cold, dark night in the fall of 2015. As we sat there, we knew what was about to happen." And there you go. People are like, hanging like, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? You never know. They're bad pauses, though, and I know that I do this, so as you people don't comment on this, but they're bad pauses, too, which are called vocal pauses, and we want to avoid vocal pauses. That's using things like yes, you know, like. We want to avoid that as much as we can. Can we totally eliminate it? Probably not. But can we address it? Yes, you can address it. Inflection deals with enthusiasm, like putting certain emphasis on certain words. If you've ever been in trouble, I got in trouble a lot as a child. So when your mom or dad goes, "Don't you ever do that again," you know that it's a good idea to never do that again because he or she said, "Don't you ever do that again." So you know because there's an inflection on the word ever. So pronunciation, articulation, those kind of things are really important. We want to make sure that we pronounce words correctly. Let's say you don't know how to pronounce a word. What can you do? Go to a librarian. Librarians are smart. Find a librarian, find one of your friends. Go Merriam-Webster.com is another thing. You can type the word in, make sure the word is correct, hit the listen to it button, and it'll tell you actually how to say the word. Totally need for you to do that. Because sometimes if you mispronounce a word, you can get into a lot of trouble. I actually had a student one time that talked about you need to watch for the signs of pneumonia. And she actually meant pneumonia. Dialect is another thing. Of course, dialects are going to be considered whatever region you're from, you'll have a certain dialect. So you got to be really careful with that. I'm not saying that people want to change their dialect for public speaking, but in some cases, your dialect may come in handy. So it's a great way to connect with people. So don't change it, but just be aware of it and just watch out for it. The last thing, of course, are the nonverbal aspects that go along with public speaking. A lot of times people just kind of brush this off. It's all about just talking to people. No, it's all about the package. You got to be able to make sure that everything comes together, the verbal and the nonverbal aspects. And so from nonverbal, the first thing, of course, is personal appearance. You want to make sure that you look good. If you look good, you'll feel good. So when we give our speeches, of course, we're going to be dressed up. We want to look good, no pajamas. Make sure that, maybe especially for online students, that the environment is clean, picked up, and that people in your audience are sitting there and being well attentive, but you look professional. You always need to look professional. Eye contact. I'm sure somewhere at some point somebody said to you, "Oh, just look at the back of the room," or "Look at the bricks," or "Imagine them in their underwear." Don't ever do that. That's a terrible idea. Look at people in their eye or eyes. Look at them in their eyes. Hopefully they have two. Well, never mind. But always make good eye contact with your audience. When you look at your audience, you're able to tell if you're connecting with them or you're not connecting with them. A lot of times people want to avoid that. They'll try to look at people in the forehead. Do not look at me in the forehead. Look at my forehead, how big it is. I do not want you people looking at my forehead. Okay, so make direct eye contact with them. And I'm going to be looking for that. I don't want you looking at the camera. I want you looking at the audience. It's very, very important. Facial expressions should be natural, and they should not be forced. If you've ever watched Big Bang Theory, I don't want you to like Sheldon Cooper and force this like that. I want them to look very natural. I also want them to correlate with what your topic is. Like obviously, I don't want you talking about, "Hey, how you doing? Today we're going to talk about what it takes to euthanize puppies," and like smiling the whole time. That's not good. Don't do that. Posture. Please, stand up straight. Look at your audience the entire time. Don't slouch. Hold your shoulders up, as they say. Have good posture, man. And then, of course, gestures. Hand gestures. Never put your hands in your pockets. Never put your hands in your pockets. Always leave your hands out. Even if you aren't using your hands, leave them out so where people can actually see them. But hand gestures should always be natural. You don't want to force hand gestures. I don't want to start like you're doing karate the entire time. Have it to where you're actually, using them naturally. And let's say you don't feel comfortable using hand gestures, just cross your hands and leave them just like this. That's okay. But again, make sure that they're always where we can see them. The last thing, of course, is proxemics. And proxemics deals with power. And proxemics also deals with space and the study of space. Now, you may not have this problem with your speeches because you guys are online and it's hard to kind of see proxemics from there. But the idea is that as you're giving speeches, you'll see and you'll maybe watch instructors in different classrooms. They'll move around. They'll kind of get into people's space. And the idea is that's proxemics. And proxemics deals a lot with power. So those are the verbal, the nonverbal aspects that go along with delivery, the 4 different methods of delivery, and a definition of delivery that kind of work with this entire process. So I think that now that you have an understanding of how the delivery works, we're going to progress into the different components of the speech, and I think you guys will be great. If you have any questions, again, remember, email me through Canvas, and I'll be happy to answer them as fast as I possibly can.